Welcome back to Taking Charge of My Cancer podcast, episode 56. Joining me today is a very special guest, Katherine Krzys. Kathy is an archivist, actress, director, author, and theater for youth historians, received an MFA in theater for youth from Arizona State University. Under her 33-year leadership as the curator of the ASU Child Drama Collection, this archive grew to become the largest repository in the world, documenting the international history of theater for youth back to the 16th century. That's amazing. Her publications include biographies of leaders in the field, a 3-volume history of the ASSITEJ, a journal bibliographies. She was frequently invited to deliver keynote speeches at conference and landmark celebrations. In summer of 1996, she received her American Alliance for Theater and Education, Campbell Lifetime Achievement Award, and a Medallion for Honor from her Children's Theater Foundation of America. Kathy retired from ASU in February 2020 and moved to Gainesville. She was diagnosed with breast cancer in 2014, for which she was treated with a lumpectomy, radiation, and chemo. And then in November 2020, she was diagnosed with stage 4 metastasis breast cancer, for which has been received care here at UF Oncology. So Kathy, thank you so much for doing this with me. We go back to about maybe 2 years ago when you met me, and you are amazing. And I didn't know a lot of this about you until we start talking about this podcast. And I'm like, oh my God, she did all this. How come I have missing all this info in our conversations that we have many times in the last 2 years? But I think that really appreciate you doing this with me today.
Well, thank you for the invitation. You know, I refer to you as my miracle worker.
Oh.
So I want to make sure other people know about the wonderful work that you do and how important physical therapy is to the healing process.
Thank you for that. So tell us a little bit about your diagnosis. How did you find about your breast cancer back in 2014?
Well, it happened when I was living in Phoenix.
Okay.
It was the fall of 2014. It was found during a routine mammogram. They followed it up with a biopsy. So I was diagnosed at the Mayo Clinic in Phoenix with a tumor in my right breast.
Mm-hmm.
My doctor, who was my general practitioner, called me on the phone and told me and gave me the news. And then she said she was retiring, so she couldn't see me through the process ahead of me. But she did refer me to an outstanding surgeon and also an oncologist.
Okay.
So I had a lumpectomy, but they also removed 3 lymph nodes under my arm. They found cancer in the middle lymph node. So my oncologist suggested that I have 4 chemo treatments and also several weeks of radiation to prevent the return.
Mm-hmm.
But I do have to tell you, being at Mayo, it was like the Cadillac of treatment.
Mm-hmm.
When you entered the main hall where you signed in, they either had a piano playing or a jazz combo, or in one case there was a salsa band.
Oh, great.
You could order lunch from the cafeteria. It would be delivered to you during your infusion, so you could eat.
Wow.
The infusion rooms had views of the hills. There were puzzles on the table. This was my favorite thing because I'm a big puzzle freak. So they had jigsaw puzzles on the tables in the waiting room. And sometimes when I finished radiation, I had not put I had set a goal for myself to put in at least 3 pieces every visit.
Cool.
And sometimes I would not go home after radiation because I had not put those 3 pieces in yet.
That's awesome.
One of the other fun things is there was always a celebration when you finished your chemo or your radiation. They brought all the staff together. There was a bell to ring. It really made you feel like it was the end of something that had not necessarily been pleasant. But before you started the whole thing, you had to attend a class that told you about what to expect from the chemo, how it would change your body and your appetite, and for many people, how they might not be as engaged in drinking alcohol.
Mm-hmm.
And you were also set up with a dietitian, and there were lots of hugs.
Mm-hmm. Did you
Um,
happen to have physical therapy through that first series of it over there?
I did not have his physical therapy.
Okay.
And I was pronounced cancer-free 5 years later. So
Okay.
they followed me every 6 months. I would go in and meet with someone, with an oncological nurse. And I thought it was free. I was free. But in the fall of 2020, I was diagnosed with stage 4 metastatic breast cancer at Mayo. I had been having really unbearable back pain. It was getting worse and worse. But as you remember, the whole COVID pandemic started. It was
Mm-hmm.
really hard to get in for any kind of treatment.
Mm-hmm.
And it was very limited once you got in there. So it got so bad that my GP finally said, go into the emergency room. So I went into the emergency room. They did a scan, and the emergency room doctor told me that I had pancreatic cancer and referred me for another scan. Now, luckily, when they did the further scans, they found that the cancer was in my liver and bones. So that was a bit of a celebration, because things could have been a lot worse than they were.
Mm-hmm.
I had 2 weeks of radiation to get rid of the pain. And my doctor at Mayo started me on Ibrance.
Mm-hmm.
So I had bought a house in Gainesville in 2019. It was always my intention to retire there, to be near. I have one child and one grandchild. And I was able to find a house just 2 blocks away from them. My daughter came out and was with me during the process. Oh, what I left out is I also had a liver biopsy
Okay.
before the treatment started. And I was finally well enough to get on a plane, and I traveled to Gainesville in December of 2020 and started seeing an oncologist at the University of Florida. So after 3 years after diagnosis, I've had 2 regimens of pills, 1 of shots, and I'm ready to start my third treatment of chemotherapy.
Got you. Got you.
So
Okay.
that's my cancer
That's
history.
your cancer history, right? And you know, sometimes, yes, it is really is unpredictable when you are being diagnosed with cancer, if you're gonna survive, or if you're gonna be a survivor and you'll never have to deal with that. Or if, like, you know, in your case, after so many more years, decide to come back to you, right? But
Mhm.
I remember you at that point, like totally. I remember I seen you because you have some swelling on your arm, and
Mhm.
what you thought was maybe some lymphedema, and you were complaining about your back pain and, you know, your meds, and how you thought you have to just live with it because you have cancer on your bones. And I say, well, not necessarily, that is not true. I may not be able to do anything for your cancer, but I can do a lot of things for your mobility to will improve your quality of life, and hopefully it's going to help with your pain some. And so we start this route of me start working on your back, and you're a different woman today, Kathy, than what I saw 2 years ago, right? Like 2 years ago, you were, you know, in a walker, a lot of pain, you know, a lot of issues, just really having to deal with this. And how I just saw you last week, and we were talking about not the greatest news in regarding, yes, you are being monitored and you have another pet and you perhaps have a new spot, but your whole way of seeing life was completely different. You know, like 2 years ago, you were crying and like so worried about it. And last time it was like, well, yeah, I have a new spot and I'm seeing Debbie at 10 o'clock. Like, oh, well. And I absolutely brighten my day. You just made my week, because that's exactly what I'm trying to get to you guys. It's like, yes, it's nothing from the PTA standpoint I can do to avoid these things to happen, right? It's nothing I can do for your cancer, but I can do many things for you guys in regarding how can I improve your quality of life and make you be able to do things that you love to do. So that's kind of like, I just was totally like, oh my God, I love it. So you just, again, made my day. So what type of resources do you use that help you make the decisions about your treatments?
So what I have to tell you is when I came to you, I had been walking around for maybe 3 months with a large stuffed soccer ball because it was the only way I could be comfortable when I sat down or when I slept at night.
Mhm,
And I remember the first treatment, you did something to my back, and all of a sudden the pain in my back was gone. And
mhm.
that's why I call you my miracle worker. And every time I come to you and there is something new, so some kind of a side effect from whatever treatment I'm getting, and now it's neuropathy, and you're helping me work on my feet and loosen them up so that I can walk and I can be steady and I'm not afraid.
Mhm, mhm.
So I really appreciate you. And I appreciate the fact that you are training people to work with people who have cancer, that
Yep.
it's not a death sentence.
Absolutely.
It is, just get your act together and you can live maybe not the same normal life you lived before, but you don't have to be sequestered in your house.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah, well said. That's great. That's the best thing that you can do. So we go back into my question in regarding resources.
Yeah.
If you
So
what
so you I had you down as my first resource, and actually I had a second resource, a second physical therapist at UF, and she was in rehab out at Magnolia Park,
Mhm,
and she helped me with the incontinence.
mhm.
Um, and so that that really helped me to deal with again the side effects of and they believe that a lot of the incontinence came from the radiation
Okay.
that
Mhm.
I had received. The second huge thing that helped me make decisions is I have a therapist. The therapist was recommended by integrative medicine
Mhm.
at UF. She only deals with patients who have cancer. She was married to someone that was going through chemo. So whenever it came time to make a choice as to what type of chemo to use, she was an unbelievable resource for me. She
Awesome.
would look up things online. Unfortunately, she moved to Cincinnati a year ago,
Oh, I was gonna ask, who is this person?
but fortunately, we now Zoom. In
Okay.
fact, I saw her. We had a Zoom meeting on Saturday.
Excellent.
So,
Excellent.
so she's not only dealing with my cancer and my diagnoses, but she's also helping me with everyday life. So
Excellent.
when I had a fall, she like you are my cheerleaders.
Oh, that's so great to know. That's super important because sometimes it's not just about physically what you can do, but mentally what you're prepared to do, right? And how mentally you can make those changes and make those decisions, right? So
Right.
that's huge. And I'm really wish we have a much better, I mean, we have counseling in the system, but they're just so busy and sadly look like everybody in the healthcare is busier and busier than the waiting times is getting longer and longer. And I'm not really appreciating that because I feel like you guys need that right away, right? So you
Oh,
should
definitely,
do
definitely.
that
From the
and
beginning.
counseling from the beginning, just to help you to really face all these stages, right? Prior, during, after, as a survivor, the fear of this coming back to you, if comes back to you, how
Mhm.
to face it. So I'm so glad you're doing that and continue doing that. That's just gonna really, maybe that's why as well, part of why you are dealing with this so well right now.
Oh, definitely, definitely. And she used to work in the UF system,
Uh-huh.
and for a while they were paying her to create support groups.
Mm-hmm.
So she also helps me to navigate if I'm having any kind of a problem getting treatment or need another referral for another specialist, she can help me with that.
Excellent. That's very good.
And she doesn't charge a lot of money because she really feels it's important
Yeah.
for people with cancer to have the access.
Okay.
So she doesn't want that to be a barrier. So I have one last thing that was a big resource for me in making decisions, and that was I had genetic testing.
Mm-hmm.
So I understood better about the type of cancer I had. I also sent my daughter for testing to see if she was in danger of having
Mm-hmm.
the same type of cancer I had. And I also contacted other relatives
Okay.
to let them know.
Okay. How was the result of that? Everything okay with your daughter?
Everything is okay. Yes,
Okay, good,
yes,
good. Perfect,
yes.
perfect. If you can give us 3 valuable tips that you learn about your journey with your diagnosis, or 4 valuable tips, what that would be?
Okay, so the first one is see someone in integrative medicine. I saw Dr. Astores,
Mhm.
and I saw her early on, and she was the one that we talked about support groups, diet, exercise. She set me up with other specialists. She gave me a list of acupuncturists. You know, she told me to continue seeing all my regular doctors, like my eye doctor, you know, have the wax taken out of your ear, go to see your dentist, and whenever I have new side effects, she will set me up. Either my GP or Dr. Astoris will set me up with a specialist. So what it made me feel as if I was normal.
Mhm.
You know, I didn't say, well, you know, why do I need to have that? I have cancer. You know, I'm not going to be around much longer. I have an ordinary life in an ordinary medical life like I had prior to diagnosis. And speaking of that, acupuncture has been amazing. In fact, I went to my acupuncturist this morning. She has really helped me with my nauseousness. In fact, the first time I had acupuncture, I was sitting there, and this is really freaky, but I felt as if the nauseousness had left my body. I could feel it. And now what I felt like today, I feel like I have Pepsodent in my mouth.
Mhm.
So the nauseousness is, I guess, leaving and leaving me with a very pleasant peppermint taste in my mouth. She also helps me with my neuropathy. Like today, I had been having a real problem, and she put a needle, she said it was in between all my toes. And where I was very stiff walking in, especially with the rain, I walked out, I flexed my toes.
Excellent.
And the third thing that the acupuncturist helps me with is making me calm.
Mhm.
She did my pulse points at the beginning and then at the end, and she said that it 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 was an unbelievable difference
Great. Yeah.
between the two. Okay, so that's two. Third was it's okay to be bald.
You look really
So
good, by the way. Love your scars.
that's why I sent you that picture. When the first time I was bald was when I was still in Phoenix, so after my chemo in Phoenix. And I had a hairdresser who also went through breast cancer. And she said, Kathy, when your hair starts falling out, come and I will shave your head for free. So when I noticed big clumps of hair on my pillow, I called her up and she got me right in. And I was sitting in the chair and she started to shave my head and she started crying. And I started laughing because I look darn good bald. So it was a very pleasant experience for me. Right now, my hair has grown back in between chemo, but they have told me with the next round I'm going to lose it again. So luckily, I saved my wig
Mm-hmm.
and I saved all my little hats and whatever, so I am all set.
Mm-hmm.
So what's the third one? Oh, I have a social worker that I became friendly with. She's at UF and she is on the same floor as oncology. She helps me with problem scheduling. She helped me pay for some of the more expensive drugs when I first got started. So those are the four things that I definitely recommend that help me on my journey.
Excellent. How about your most painful lesson, or
Oh yeah.
maybe
So
one or
this
two through this journey?
this I had to think about a while, but I've been very independent for a long time. I was a single mom. So the most painful thing to me, and I'm going to cry, is sometimes you need to ask for help.
Mm-hmm.
I had a fall a couple of months ago. I fractured two ribs, wasn't able to pick anything up. Um, I couldn't, it was really hard to feed myself. I couldn't go shopping. So I called on my daughter. I called on my friends and neighbors. You have to find that right balance between being independent and knowing that it's okay sometimes to ask for help. And
Yeah,
it's all about your quality of life.
yeah, yeah.
I have told my daughter, and it's in my will, that I do not want to be in assisted living,
Mm-hmm.
that I want to be in my house,
Mm-hmm.
um, and have people come in to care for me here
Mm-hmm.
when the time comes. So, um, I mean, it was really painful for me to not be able to fit in my clothes anymore. My job required me to dress every day. I was in front of people. I had lots of cool clothes that no longer fit. And when I dress up and go out, I can't wear those pretty little velvet pumps that I have. I have to wear my big old wide toe shoes,
Mm-hmm.
but I'm safe
Mm-hmm.
and I'm happy and I'm still getting out there.
I got it.
So,
Yeah, yeah. But it's not just necessarily all about your cancer, right? I cannot fit on my clothes either that I was able to fit on like 10 years ago. So it's not just about you. Unfortunately, it's about this metabolism that slows down no matter what you do to try to don't let that happen. But again, everything comes back to as long you feel good to yourself
right,
and you're doing what you're happy to do,
right.
it's okay. And it is, it is no what. And that doesn't mean that you cannot dress up,
Mhm.
then, having more comfortable clothes. And I don't know about you, but, I'm from Colombia, South America. I'm from Bogota, which is the capital. So in Bogota, it's like New York, right? So everybody is about the look, right? We always worry about like how do we look, and you always dress up nicely, and the one thing I really miss when I moved here was part of that. And I'm still kind of like try to dress up myself within the uniform that we have to wear here, and try
Yes.
to make it fun. But yes, sometimes I miss that. Like that's one thing I love to do when I go home is that it's like, oh, this is great to have like, I mean, I kind of wear a dress here or things like that just because my work, but won't be as comfortable. However, I sometimes, pull out some skirts and things like that. But yeah, so sometimes you can still dressing up within being just more comfortable. But I think as we aging, it's just more about comfort, right? Like if I
Exactly.
comfortable with a pair of sweats on a weekend versus a tight jeans, I'm gonna go with the sweats, right? Because this one makes you more comfortable. So yeah, yeah. So it is nothing to do with what you're going through. I think it's just, that what life kind of bring us, period. So all right. How about if anything that you have that will be a value for our audience and what you share with us?
Um, so when I was diagnosed with stage 4 cancer, I just thought it was the end of me. You know, stage 4 is the worst. And I can't remember who told me, it may have been my therapist. And she said that they don't think about cancer as being that way anymore. They think of it as more as being a chronic disease.
Mhm.
So you treat the symptoms, you you're medicated, you go through a process, but it's not a death sentence.
Mhm. Yep.
And so when I started thinking about it as being a chronic disease, then it gave me more life and hope.
Mhm. Yep. Absolutely. Yep. You're absolutely right. Um,
And
and
and and the second thing I have, because I always have more than one, is don't be afraid to get a second opinion. When we move from treatment with pills to chemo, I got a second opinion from Mayo. And in fact, they never charged me for it. Sent them all the tests, etc. Had meetings with them, Zoom meetings with them, with my oncologist there. So, and my oncologist here was okay with that. In fact, she encouraged me.
yep.
Now, the people at Mayo suggested a different treatment going forward, not chemo. But my oncologist here said they were not as familiar as she was with the machinations of my tumor.
Mhm.
And so I went with what my UF oncologist said.
Mhm. Great. And I think you're in great hands. I think she's amazing. So yeah, so I'm glad you stick with her. She's
Yes.
very and you're right. You have to have the ownership of any disease, no matter what you have. You can call it cancer, you can call it diabetes, you can call it whatever, arthritis. You are
Right,
the owner of your own health. So don't let anybody dictate what you have to do. You never have to do anything. You're just as a part of any other physician or any healthcare provider on this journey, right? So it is
right.
so critical that you realize, and people who is listen to us, that it's not because the doctor says so you're gonna do it, right?
Mhm.
They know their stuff for sure, but you know your body more than anybody else. So it's super important for if you don't feel right because you're feeling that it's not a good fit for you either because you don't like what they say or because you just don't feel it's a good chemistry, right?
Right.
You're totally entitled to have second opinions. And I always say to my patients, even before I was doing cancer, just doing orthopedics, if you have a physician who tell you, I'm not really too sure what's going on here, I would like for you to see ABC, that's a
Mm-hmm.
good physician. If you have a
Sure.
physician who tell you, absolutely not, I'm the right one, and this is what you need to do, or you need to go find somebody else, you are with the wrong physician, go find somebody else.
Right.
Because you
Right.
know that, again, like even with therapy, right? If I have a patient who I really don't know what's happening, or I'm not making any difference, I want them to go and I either call up one of my colleagues that work with me and say, with a good fresh pair of eyes, will you look at this patient for
Mhm.
me and see what do you think I'm missing? Or maybe you're seeing it from a different, perspective. And then I can totally like, oh wow, yes, I didn't think of that. Let me try that and see if that makes a difference.
Mhm. Mhm.
Or you know what, maybe something else is going on systemically and you need to go back to see your physician before we can continue on because I'm not making any changes in how you feel. So it's very important for people to realize, you have the ownership to go look for second opinions on anything out there, and then just really pick the right physician or the right healthcare provider that you're working with.
Yeah, I also have a notebook,
Uh-huh.
and before I go to any of my doctors,
Mhm.
I write down all the questions, all the symptoms that I've had since the last time. And so I go in with an agenda,
Yep.
and then I write down all the responses.
Mhm.
And whenever I go to my oncologist, my daughter always goes, just because sometimes your ears
Yeah.
do not necessarily, especially if it's bad news.
Yeah.
And I have found that to be very helpful. And I
Absolutely.
am now on my second volume.
Yeah. Wow. And I
I
think,
made it. I made it through
yeah,
the first volume.
yeah. And I think this is super important. And I always say to patients, I know unfortunately we have in a healthcare system where there is more patients, physician has to be rushing in and out of the rooms, right? And I always say to my patients that I want you to write down the questions, and the moment the physician comes in, you tell them you're not leaving this room until you don't answer these questions, period. And they're like, oh, okay. I guess I need to listen to this. And then you have the right to ask that. And then
Mhm,
you have the right to ask for answers
mhm.
that you will understand. And sometimes I work with some physicians who are like super smart, that even when we talk in medical stuff, they just sometimes is like, oh my God, I don't know what you just say. And let me just then go talk to the resident who can just kind of have more line words and explain to me and translate what he said, because I really don't know. And I hear that a lot with some of the patients, talking with some of the physicians who are really, their mind is up here, but you need this other resident or the nurse or the assistant who kind of bring those to your line words so you understand
Sure.
what you're saying. Nothing wrong with that. Don't ever feel like you are like, oh my God, I'm not going to ask those questions because they feel like I'm dumb or I really don't know. No, absolutely not. So just ask every question. Ask them to tell you in line words. This is what I need to know so my brain can understand what's going on and if I want to do this or not. So that's really important. So that's a really good tool right there. Is any books that you would recommend to the audience and why?
Yeah, that was an interesting question. Okay. So I only read happy books.
Yep.
I don't read, like crime novels where lots of people are dying and, getting shot or whatever. And so the three books I have to recommend is, the first one is, I read young adult novels. Some of them are graphic novels, and some of these I read with my grandson.
Mhm.
So it's something that I'm reading to him. We're having this wonderful shared moment with our arms around each other on the couch. So the one that we've just finished that we just loved, it's called Elf, Dog, and Owlhead. It's by M.T. Anderson. In fact, we loved it so much. Last summer, we took a trip to Destin, and it's a very long drive. What is it, about 4.5 hours? And so I was reading it out loud in the car. So not only was my grandson engaged, but also my daughter and my son-in-law,
That's
and they
awesome.
wanted to know what's happening next.
Uh-huh.
So definitely young adult fiction, and if you can share it, then that's even better. They're usually easy reads. The second one is probably my most favorite book of all time. It's called Beautiful Ruins by Jess Walter. It's about the filming of Cleopatra with Richard Burton
Mhm.
and Elizabeth Taylor. The thing I loved about it is it was set in Cinque Terre. When I was 60 years old, and at every 10 years, I try to do something special to celebrate my birthday. And that particular year, I met my daughter in England, and we took a trip, and we spent 5 days in Cinque Terre, which are these wonderful set of islands on the western Italian shore. And so reading that book not only engaged me because of the story, but it also took me to another place. And that's another thing when I choose books. I
Yep.
want a book that I'm going to stay up until 3 a.m. in the morning because it just is so engaging for
Uh-huh.
me. The third one is one I read recently. It's called Remarkably Bright Creatures by Shelby Van Pelt. And it's about a person who has a relationship with an octopus.
Interesting.
It's a very happy book. There are multiple stories, and you're wondering how each person's story is going to tie together. How is the author going to bring them
I,
together? But the whole thing with the octopus was just absolutely gorgeous. It's an octopus that does not want to stay in his tank in an aquarium.
that's awesome. That sounds really good. I'm gonna look for that one.
Yes.
All right. And then is any activities that would you recommend during treatment?
Yes, definitely. Dr. Astores told me that it was, she suggested that I take a walk each morning. And there's something about getting up and putting my shoes on and just walking through the neighborhood. I don't walk long, maybe 10 minutes, but I see a lot of people. I live in a part of Gainesville where people are walking their dogs. So I always get to say hello to someone. My second activity is I suggest that everyone volunteer. I volunteer at the Friends of the Alachua County Library. And I've met a lot of people who are my age, who are also retired, who have been just delightful. The third thing is the power of prayer. Going to church and Bible study, and the friends I have made there have really helped me to have hope. And the last thing is don't be afraid to travel. In the beginning, I was traveling with just my family. But then a couple of months ago, my college roommate called me and she said, let's go to our 50th college reunion in New Haven. And so I got on a plane and by myself, and there were wheelchairs that you order ahead of time. They were right there. In fact, it's so much better than walking. Why did I walk all those times changing planes in Atlanta? I don't know.
Uh-huh.
So you can do it. You can travel.
Yep. Yep, you can. And everything is go back to, again, quality of life, right? Don't postpone something when you can do it now because you don't know if you're going to have that time later, right?
Yeah, definitely. Definitely.
Is any podcast that you would recommend to the audience?
So this is really strange because this is my first podcast. So
Uh-huh.
I listened to some of yours just so I had some idea, what was going to be happening, but that's just never been my thing. And I think part of it is I'm a visual learner.
Uh-huh.
And so reading, is my cup of tea. But it's a little harder for me to keep focus if I'm just listening to something.
Got you. But see, when you go in your travels, while you're waiting on planes or whatever, you can be listening to something.
But I'm reading those good books that I just told
As
you.
well. Yeah. There is one question that you wish I would have asked you and why you have answered it.
So my question is, what can you do to make the whole experience, the whole treatment experience better? Okay, first thing is wear colorful clothes, funky earrings, because it just makes you feel good. If you're wearing pink pants, by golly, then you're walking differently down the hall than if you have a frumpy old pair of jeans on.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
The second thing is bring presents to the infusion nurses. They work really hard and
Uh-huh.
they are really appreciative. And so I bring boxes of chocolates, I bring Pepperidge Farm individually wrapped cookies. At Easter, I brought them a big chocolate Easter egg. I gave you at Thanksgiving chocolate
Yeah.
turkeys.
Yes, those are
I,
delicious.
I just I
Yeah.
just want you to know how appreciative I am. And I think sometimes I get a little better treatment. I don't know. Maybe not that, but the nurses have become my friends.
Mhm. Mhm.
They're not just there poking me.
Yep.
And so the gifts prompted conversations,
Yep.
and it has made the whole infusion process better. Um, One of the biggest thing I've worked at in and talking to the social worker is I really am trying to create a more pleasant place in to have infusions. After being at Mayo, there were just so many perks and so many things that made me happy. Pictures on the wall, that um, I, I, the social worker and I have talked about a lot of things that can be done, but there's a lot of bureaucracy.
Mhm.
So we started with a very small thing. She said, let's just start with one small thing. And they did not have tea in the infusion area. So what I do is I buy tea. I buy all different kinds, boxes, maybe 10, 20 when it's cold like this, a lot of tea, not so much in the summer. And it's
Mm,
available to patients.
that's really,
And the nurses tell me that it makes them feel good.
that's great. You're so
You know,
sweet.
to have like an orange ginger, tea
Yeah.
rather than a cup of coffee, which is really the only other thing available. So, yeah, that's it.
Oh
I
my
just
God.
so appreciate this opportunity.
No, it has been lovely. I really, really appreciate you doing this with me. I know you thought and thought about it for a little while.
I
And, and, and,
did.
and then you're amazing. You're such an amazing person. And I know that all your valuable, learning experience through this journey will be help others. So really, I'll appreciate you being with me today.
Well, thank you. Once you're a teacher, you want to continue that process
Yep.
and you
Yep.
want to help people. So thank you
Absolutely.
for giving me that opportunity.
Absolutely, Kathy. And thank you so much again. And you have a great evening.
Thank you. You too.
Bye.
Bye.